If you're hiking in Appalachia and the wind starts sounding like humans screaming, standard survival training will actually get you killed. According to top-secret ranger protocols, you must never look up at the canopy and you must ignore any frantic calls for help coming from the trees. I learned this the hard way, and what I discovered changed everything I thought I knew about these mountains. My name is Ethan Bradford, and I've been a search and rescue ranger in the Appalachian Mountains for 11 years. I've pulled lost hikers out of ravines, treated hypothermia in below-freezing conditions, and coordinated rescues in weather that would make most people refuse to leave their homes. I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. I was wrong. It started with a missing person report on October 14th. A solo hiker named Jennifer Ortiz had failed to return from a day hike on the Black Ridge Trail. Her car was still in the parking lot, her check-in time had passed by 6 hours, and cell phone pings showed her last location near the summit ridge. Standard recovery operation. I'd done hundreds of them. I assembled a team, 4 experienced rangers including myself. We headed out at first light, following Jennifer's planned route. The weather was deteriorating, a cold front moving in from the west, wind speeds picking up. We had maybe 6 hours before conditions became too dangerous for search operations. We found her pack at the 3-mile marker, partially hidden under a fallen branch. The contents were scattered: water bottle, first aid kit, trail mix, like she dropped it in a hurry. "She's moving fast," said Coleman Hayes, one of my team members. "Maybe injured and disoriented?" "Or running from something," added Iris Pemberton, our tracker. I didn't like that second option, but I couldn't dismiss it. We'd had bear encounters in this area before. We pressed on, following boot prints in the soft earth. The trail climbed steeply here, winding through dense hardwood forest. The wind was picking up, rushing through the canopy with a sound like distant traffic. Then, around mile 4, we heard it. A scream. High-pitched, desperate, coming from somewhere above us, a woman's voice calling for help. "That's her," Coleman said immediately, already moving toward the sound. I grabbed his arm. "Wait, Ethan, she's right there!" "Something's wrong. That sound, it's not coming from ground level." We all stopped, listening. The scream came again, and this time I could pinpoint it. Not from the trail ahead, not from the forest floor at all. From the canopy, 60, maybe 70 feet up. "How the hell did she get up there?" Iris whispered. The scream repeated, identical in pitch and duration. Too identical, like a recording playing on loop. "Help me, please, I'm hurt!" The same words, the same inflection, the same desperate tone. Coleman started to look up, craning his neck toward the sound. "Don't," I said sharply, "don't look up at the canopy." "What? Why?" "Just don't. Trust me." I didn't know why I said it, some instinct, some deep-buried piece of training I couldn't quite remember. But every fiber of my being was screaming not to look up. The voice called again. "Help! Someone help me!" Then another voice joined it, a man's voice, equally desperate. "Down here! I've fallen!" Then a child's voice. "Mommy? Mommy, where are you?" 3 voices now, all calling from the canopy, all perfectly distinct, all impossible. "What the fuck is that?" Iris breathed. I keyed my radio. "Base, this is Bradford. We're at mile 4 on Black Ridge. We've got an acoustic anomaly, multiple phantom voices in the canopy, advising caution." Static crackled back. Then the dispatcher's voice, clear and urgent. "Bradford, confirm you said phantom voices." "Affirmative. Sounds like distress calls, but they're coming from the tree canopy and repeating identically." A long pause. Then, "Bradford, you need to activate Protocol Shriek immediately. Do not look up, do not respond to the voices, do not—" The radio died in a burst of static. Coleman was staring at me. "Protocol Shriek? What the hell is Protocol Shriek?" I don't know, but we're not looking up and we're not responding to those voices. The screaming intensified. Now there were dozens of voices, overlapping, calling for help in every direction. Men, women, children, all desperate, all terrified, all coming from the canopy above us. "Ethan, we have to do something," Coleman shouted over the cacophony. "We keep moving, eyes forward, find Jennifer." "But that's an order." We pushed forward, forcing ourselves to ignore the voices. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Every instinct screamed to look up, to locate the source, to help whoever was calling. But I kept my eyes locked on the trail ahead, and my team followed my lead. The voices followed us. They moved through the canopy, staying directly overhead, always just out of sight, and they were getting louder. We found Jennifer 2 miles later. She was standing in the middle of the trail, perfectly still, her head tilted back at an unnatural angle, staring straight up into the canopy. Her mouth was open, frozen in a silent scream. "Jennifer!" Coleman rushed forward. I grabbed him again. "Don't touch her. Look at her eyes." Jennifer's eyes were open, unblinking, pupils fully dilated. She wasn't breathing, or rather she was breathing so slowly that each breath took nearly a minute. Her chest would rise almost imperceptibly, hold, then fall. She'd been standing here for hours, maybe since yesterday. "Jennifer!" I said carefully, positioning myself in her line of sight without looking up. "Jennifer, can you hear me?" No response. She just stood there, staring upward, transfixed by something we couldn't see. The voices in the canopy had gone silent. The wind had dropped to nothing. The forest was perfectly still. Then Jennifer's mouth moved. Words came out, slow and slurred, like a recording played at half speed. "They're so beautiful." "What's beautiful?" I asked. "The singers, they want to show me how to fly." Ice ran down my spine. "Jennifer, I need you to close your eyes. Look down. Look at me." "Can't. They're showing me the song. I have to learn the song." Her breathing slowed further. I could see frost forming on her eyelashes, her lips turning blue. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and she wasn't dressed for it. Iris moved closer, thermal blanket in hand. "We need to warm her up. She's hypothermic." "Don't look up," I warned. "Whatever you do, don't look up." Iris carefully draped the blanket over Jennifer's shoulders without breaking her own sightline to the ground. Jennifer didn't react. She just kept staring upward, her lips moving in silent song. Coleman's radio suddenly crackled to life. Not our dispatcher, a different voice, old, gravelly, with an accent I couldn't place. "Bradford, this is Warden Castellanos. You've encountered a shrieking gale. Confirm." I grabbed Coleman's radio. "Confirmed. We have one victim, female, approximately 30 years old, suffering from exposure and I don't know what to call it. She's catatonic, staring at the canopy." "How long has she been looking?" "Unknown. At least several hours based on her condition." A heavy sigh. "Then she's already gone. You need to leave her and evacuate immediately." "We're not leaving a victim." "She's not a victim anymore, Bradford. She's bait. The gale is using her to draw you in. If you look up, if you try to help her, it'll take you too." "What the hell is a shrieking gale?" "An atmospheric phenomenon. Occurs in the Appalachians under specific conditions, barometric pressure, wind patterns, lunar phase. Creates a vortex in the upper canopy that mimics human voices. But that's not the dangerous part." "Then what is?" "The vortex attracts something. We don't know what, something that exists in the sound itself. When you look up, when you see it, it rewires your neural pathways, makes you want to join the song, makes you want to ascend. I looked at Jennifer, still frozen, still staring upward. Ascend where? Into the canopy, into the wind. People who see it start climbing. They climb until they can't climb anymore, and then they try to fly. We've pulled bodies out of trees, Bradford, dozens of them over the years, all with the same expression, peaceful, like they found exactly what they were looking for. My mouth was dry. How do we save her? You don't. Once they've looked for more than an hour, the rewiring is permanent. Her brain is no longer processing reality the way ours does. She's living in a different frequency now. The best thing you can do is leave her. The gale will take her when it's ready. That's not acceptable. It's the only option. Bradford, you need to understand something. The shrieking gale has been documented in these mountains for 200 years. The Cherokee called it the singers in the sky. Early settlers called it the devil's choir. We've tried everything: forced evacuations, sedation, sensory deprivation. Nothing works. Once someone looks up and sees the singers, they belong to the gale. The wind picked up again. The voices returned, but different now. They were singing, a harmony so complex and beautiful it made my chest ache. Coleman took a step toward Jennifer, his eyes starting to drift upward. "Coleman!" I shouted, grabbing his shoulder, eyes down. He blinked, focusing on me. "Did you hear that? The music?" "Don't listen. Focus on my voice. We're leaving now." "But Jennifer is already gone." We retreated down the trail, forcing ourselves not to look back. The singing followed us for the first mile, then faded as we descended below the tree line. By the time we reached base camp, the wind had returned to normal. Just wind, no voices, no music. Warden Castellanos was waiting for us. He was in his 70s, weathered and lean, with eyes that had seen too much. He was wearing a ranger uniform I didn't recognize, older style, with patches I'd never seen before. "You did well," he said. "You didn't look up. You survived." "What about Jennifer?" "She'll be gone by morning. The gale takes them during the night. We'll find her eventually, if we're lucky, usually high in the canopy, wedged in a fork between branches, peaceful, like she's sleeping." I wanted to punch him. You knew this could happen, and you didn't warn us." "We warn everyone who needs to know. You're getting the briefing now. Better late than never." "People are dying." "And they'll keep dying until we figure out how to stop the gale. But we can't stop it if every ranger who encounters it ends up in a tree. That's why we have Protocol Shriek. That's why you don't look up." He led us to a trailer at the edge of base camp. Inside was a wall covered with photographs, dozens of them, people frozen in trees, all with the same peaceful expression, all staring upward at something we couldn't see. 247 documented cases since 1823. Those are just the ones we found. There are probably hundreds more we missed. The gale appears 3 to 4 times a year, always in October or November, always during specific atmospheric conditions. We've learned to predict it with about 70% accuracy. "Why don't you close the trails?" Iris demanded. "We do, when we know it's coming, but sometimes it appears without warning. Sometimes the conditions align faster than we can react, and sometimes," he paused, "sometimes people ignore the closures." He pulled out a thick folder and handed it to me. "Protocol Shriek, classified documentation. You're authorized now. Read it, memorize it, and for God's sake, don't look up." I spent the next week reading everything in that folder. The history of the shrieking gale, the atmospheric science behind it, the psychological profiles of survivors and victims, the failed rescue attempts. The science was complicated, but I'll try to summarize. The Appalachian Mountains create unique wind patterns due to their age and erosion. Under specific conditions, cold front meeting warm air, particular barometric pressures, certain lunar phases, these wind patterns can create standing vortices in the upper canopy. The vortices interact with the trees in ways that generate sound at frequencies that mimic human vocal ranges. But that's just the trigger. The real phenomenon is what the sound attracts. The documents called it the resonance entity, not a physical being, but something that exists in the intersection between sound, wind, and consciousness. When the vortices form, when the singing begins, the entity manifests. People who look up and see it describe impossible geometries, colors that don't exist, patterns that rewrite how their brains process reality. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You become part of the song. Your consciousness starts vibrating at the same frequency as the entity. You become convinced that the only way to truly join the song is to ascend, to climb into the canopy and let the wind carry you. The documents included transcripts from the few people who'd looked up briefly and survived. Their descriptions were consistent, but incomprehensible. It was singing mathematics. I saw sound as architecture. The wind had thoughts, and they were beautiful. I understood why birds never want to land. Every survivor suffered permanent neurological changes. Some developed perfect pitch. Others lost the ability to distinguish between sound and light. One woman insisted that every sentence had a color, and she could only communicate by humming. The neurological damage was permanent, but at least they were alive. Jennifer Ortiz was found 3 days later, exactly as Castellanos predicted. High in an oak tree, wedged between branches 70 feet up. Her eyes were still open, still staring upward. The autopsy showed no physical cause of death. Her heart had simply stopped, like she'd decided to turn it off. Over the next 2 years, I responded to 4 more Shrieking Gale events. Each time, the protocol was the same. Evacuate the area, don't look up, don't respond to the voices, retrieve victims if they're still on the ground and haven't been looking for more than 30 minutes. We saved 3 people using that protocol, lost 9. The psychological toll was immense. Hearing voices crying for help and being forced to ignore them violated every instinct I had as a rescue ranger. But I learned. I taught my team. We drilled the protocol until it was automatic. Don't look up. Don't respond. Don't deviate. The 3 rules that kept us alive. Then came the November incident. A family of 4, parents and 2 kids, ages 7 and 9, went missing on the Ridgeline Trail. By the time we got the report, they'd been gone for 18 hours. The atmospheric conditions were perfect for a shrieking gale. We found the father first. He was at the base of a cliff, neck broken from a fall. His eyes were open, staring upward, that same peaceful expression on his face. He'd climbed the cliff face and jumped, convinced he could fly. The mother was a 1/4 mile away, suspended in a tree canopy 40 feet up, still alive but unresponsive. Her lips were moving in silent song. The children, God, the children. We found them together, holding hands, standing in a clearing, both staring straight up. Both had been there long enough that hypothermia was setting in. Their lips were blue, frost in their hair. I approached carefully. "Hey guys, I'm Ethan. I'm here to help." The older child, a girl, spoke without looking away from the canopy. "The singers say we can fly if we're brave enough." "The singers are lying," I said. "I need you to close your eyes and look at me." "But they're so beautiful. They're showing us colors we've never seen." "Please, close your eyes. Look down." The younger boy giggled. "You can't see them because you're not listening. You have to really listen. Then they show you everything." I was losing them. They'd been looking for too long. The rewiring was already happening. I made a decision that violated every protocol. I grabbed both children, forced their heads down, covered their eyes with my hands. They screamed and struggled, fighting to look back up, but I held firm. "Coleman, Iris, get over here and help me." My team rushed in. Coleman grabbed the girl. Iris took the boy. We physically restrained them, keeping their eyes covered, dragging them away from the clearing. The children screamed the whole way, not in pain or fear, in anguish, like we were tearing them away from something they loved more than life itself. "Let me see! Let me see them! They're singing for me! You're hurting us! They want to help us! Please, just let me look one more time!" It took 3 hours to get them out of the forest. 3 hours of carrying, screaming, fighting children who were convinced we were the monsters, not their saviors. When we finally reached base camp, Castellanos was waiting. His expression was grim. "You broke protocol. I saved 2 kids. You don't know that yet." The children were airlifted to a specialized facility, one that wasn't on any public record. Castellanos wouldn't tell me where. He said they needed observation and treatment for resonance exposure. I demanded updates. He refused. 2 weeks later, he called me into his office. "The boy's showing signs of recovery. The neural rewiring hasn't fully set. He's confused, experiencing auditory hallucinations, but the doctors think with therapy, he might return to normal functioning." Relief flooded through me. And the girl? His expression darkened. "She's not responding, refuses to close her eyes, won't stop humming. The song is changing, evolving. The doctors say she's creating new harmonies, patterns they've never documented before." What does that mean? It means she's still connected to the entity, and the connection is getting stronger, not weaker. 3 days later, the girl, Emma she was named, threw herself from a 4th-story window. She died instantly. The last thing she said to her nurse was, "I can hear them calling. They've been so patient. It's time to fly." She was 9 years old. I quit the following week. Castellanos tried to stop me, said I was one of the best rangers he'd trained, that the program needed people like me. But I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't ignore the screaming, couldn't walk away from victims, couldn't accept that some people are just gone and there's nothing we can do. I moved to the coast, got a job with a small municipal park system. Flat land, no mountains, no canopies that sounded like singing. But I still hear it sometimes. Late at night, when the wind picks up, I hear echoes of that harmony. I find myself wanting to look up to see if the singers have followed me. I have to actively remind myself, don't look up, don't respond, don't deviate. The protocol saved my life, but it cost me something essential. Every scream I ignored, every victim I abandoned, every time I chose my survival over someone else's rescue. I did what I was trained to do. I followed the protocol. I survived. But I'm not sure I'm alive, not in the way I used to be. Sometimes I dream I'm back in those mountains, standing in a clearing, head tilted back, staring up at the canopy. And in the dream, I finally see them, the singers, and they're beautiful. Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Now, let's get started. Imagine you're alone in a ranger station during a storm, monitoring emergency frequencies when you hear a voice whispering coordinates. The voice is distorted by static, but unmistakable. You know it instantly because you've heard it your entire life. It's yours, your own voice whispering from a frequency that's been dead for 20 years, giving you numbers that lead to a grave with your name on it. Your future self is trying to warn you, but warn you about what? And if you listen, if you change your fate, does that mean your future self never existed to send the warning? My name is Vincent Hayes. I'm a ranger with the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. I've worked the night patrol for 6 years, monitoring radio traffic, responding to emergencies, keeping watch over 900,000 acres of wilderness during the hours when most people are asleep. On the night of November 18th, 2024, during the worst storm to hit the region in a decade, I heard my own voice whisper to me from the future. And everything I thought I knew about time, fate, and free will collapsed in on itself like a dying star. This is what happened when I answered myself. The Weather Service had been warning us for 3 days. A massive low-pressure system moving up from the Gulf, colliding with Arctic air coming down from Canada. The conditions were perfect for what meteorologists call a bomb cyclone. Rapid intensification, extreme winds, heavy precipitation. By 7 p.m. on November 18th, the storm hit with full force. Winds gusting to 70 miles per hour. Rain so heavy, visibility dropped to near zero. Power outages across 3 counties. The station's emergency generator kicked in at 7:34 p.m., and I settled in for what I knew would be a long night. My job during storms like this is simple. Monitor all emergency frequencies, coordinate with other agencies, dispatch rescue teams if needed, and keep detailed logs of all radio traffic. We use old equipment for redundancy, modern digital systems and ancient analog backups from the 1980s that still work even when everything else fails. The main console was digital, Motorola APX series, encrypted, crystal clear. But we also kept 3 analog receivers running continuously on different frequency bands, VHF, UHF, and 1 old Regency scanner that covered the entire spectrum from 25 MHz to 512 MHz, including frequencies that hadn't been officially used since the early 2000s. At 9:47 p.m., the Regency scanner locked on to something. 147.385 MHz, an old Forestry Service frequency that had been decommissioned in 2003 when we switched to the digital trunked system. The frequency should have been completely dead, empty carrier wave at most, but it wasn't empty. There was a voice, whispering, barely audible under layers of static and atmospheric interference from the storm. I turned up the volume and listened. 38.713, negative 79.842. 38.713, negative 79.842. The same numbers, over and over, precise, deliberate, coordinates. I grabbed a pen and wrote them down, latitude and longitude, somewhere in the Monongahela, probably within my sector. The voice continued whispering, same numbers, same cadence, never stopping, never varying. I tried to respond. Station 7 to unknown transmitter on 147.385. Please identify yourself and state your emergency. No response, just the whisper, continuing its loop. 38.713, negative 79.842. I checked the GPS coordinates against my sector map. The location was remote, a section of forest about 8 miles from the station, accessible only by fire road. No structures, no trails, no reason for anyone to be transmitting from there, especially not on a dead frequency during a massive storm. I logged the transmission and continued monitoring. The whisper never stopped. For the next hour, while I handled other emergency traffic, downed power lines, stranded motorists, flooded roads, the voice kept whispering those coordinates on a frequency that shouldn't have carried any signal at all. At 11:23 p.m., I recognized the voice. It was my own.
I'd been listening to the transmission for nearly 2 hours, so focused on the numbers that I hadn't paid attention to the actual sound of the voice. But during a brief lull in the storm, when the static cleared for just a moment, I heard it clearly. The vocal patterns, the slight hoarseness, the way I pronounced the hard consonants. It was my voice, altered by whatever medium was carrying it, distorted by static and distance, but unmistakably mine. I was listening to myself whisper coordinates from a dead frequency. My hands started shaking. I replayed the recording I'd been making, isolated the clearest section, enhanced it with the digital console's audio processing. There was no doubt. The voice was mine. Not similar, not close, identical. I checked the equipment, looked for feedback loops, signal reflections, any technical explanation for how my voice could be transmitting on a frequency I wasn't using. Nothing. The transmission was coming from outside the station, from the coordinates it kept repeating, 8 miles away in the forest. I tried to rationalize it. Someone was using a recording of my voice, playing it back on the old frequency as a prank. But who would have a recording, and who would be out in the forest during a storm this severe, transmitting on a frequency that had been dead for 20 years? The whisper continued, never stopping, never changing. 38.713. Negative 79.842. I made a decision. I grabbed my emergency kit, my handheld radio, and my rain gear. I was going to those coordinates. I was going to find out what was transmitting and why it sounded like me. The shift supervisor would have told me to stay at the station. The storm was too dangerous for solo patrol. But the supervisor was dealing with evacuations in the valley, and I needed to know, needed to understand what I was hearing. I logged my departure at 11:47 p.m. and drove into the storm. The fire road was barely passable, branches down everywhere, streams overflowing across the roadbed. My truck's headlights barely penetrated the rain, turning the world into a gray void broken only by the whiteout of lightning. I drove slowly, carefully, following my GPS toward the coordinates. 8 miles took 45 minutes in conditions that would have been a 15-minute drive in good weather. The handheld radio stayed on, tuned to 147.385 megahertz. The whisper continued, my voice still repeating the coordinates, getting slightly clearer as I approached the source. At 12:34 a.m., I reached the location, a small clearing about 20 yards off the fire road, accessible by an overgrown access path that my truck could barely navigate. I parked, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped out into the storm. The wind was stronger here, no tree cover to break it. Rain drove horizontally, stinging my face despite the hood of my rain jacket. Lightning flashed constantly, turning the clearing into a strobe-lit nightmare. The whisper in my handheld radio was loud now, clear, definitely my voice. 38.713, negative 79.842. I swept my flashlight across the clearing, looking for a transmitter, a repeater, anything that could explain the signal. That's when I saw the disturbed earth. A patch of ground maybe 6 feet long and 3 feet wide, where the soil had been recently moved, not by natural erosion, deliberately. Someone had dug here, and recently, judging by how the rain was beginning to form puddles in the depression. A grave. I approached slowly, my heart hammering. The whisper in my radio continued, my own voice guiding me to this spot. At the edge of the disturbed earth, I stopped. There was something partially visible at the surface, something metallic catching my flashlight beam. I knelt down and brushed away wet soil. It was an ID tag, official National Park Service Ranger identification, the kind we wear on our uniforms. I picked it up and read the name. Vincent Hayes. My name, my employee number, my photograph, though the face in the picture looked older, more weathered. I was holding my own ID tag from a body buried in this clearing. My body. The whisper in my radio changed.
The coordinates stopped. For the first time in nearly 4 hours, my voice stopped repeating the numbers. There was a moment of silence, static, storm interference. Then my voice returned, different now, urgent, panicked. Vincent, listen, you found it. You found where they buried me. November 18th, 1:07 a.m. Lightning strike, dead oak, east side of clearing. Move, now. Don't wait, don't think, just move. I looked at my watch, 1:06 a.m. I looked east, saw the oak tree, massive, ancient. One of its main branches was already cracked, hanging at a severe angle, weakened by previous storms and now being battered by 70-mile-per-hour winds. Lightning flashed, thunder followed instantly. The storm was directly overhead. 30 seconds, my voice whispered from the radio. Run, west side, behind your truck, now. I ran. I don't know what made me obey. Survival instinct? Fear? The certainty in my own voice that this was real, this was happening, this was the moment I would die if I didn't listen. I reached my truck at 1:07 a.m. and threw myself behind it, using the vehicle as a shield. Lightning struck the oak tree with a sound like the world ending. The crack echoed across the clearing. The weakened branch, massive enough to crush a car, broke free and fell exactly where I'd been standing seconds before. The impact shook the ground, sent up a spray of mud and water. The branch landed across the disturbed earth, covering the spot where something that looked like my ID tag had been buried. I crouched behind my truck, breathing hard, rain pouring over me, and listened to my radio. Silence. Static. The transmission was gone. The frequency was dead again, empty. My future self had stopped broadcasting. The warning had been delivered. The timeline had changed. I'd been supposed to die in that clearing, crushed by a lightning-struck branch, buried in that grave. But I'd heard my own voice from a future that no longer existed, warning me, saving me, by broadcasting coordinates and warnings across time on a frequency that shouldn't have carried any signal at all. I called it in at 1:19 a.m., reported the lightning strike, the fallen tree, the disturbed earth, said I'd found what looked like evidence of a burial and requested a forensic team. They arrived at dawn, 3 investigators and a cadaver dog. They excavated the site while I stood nearby, still holding the ID tag I'd found. 6 feet down, they found remains. Human, male, badly decomposed. Clothing suggested a ranger uniform. The investigators photographed everything, documented the scene, prepared to transport the remains for identification. One of them approached me. "Hayes, this is strange. The body's been here for a while, but the grave was recently disturbed, like someone dug it up and filled it back in. How long has the body been here?" Hard to say without proper analysis, but based on decomposition, I'd estimate several months at least, maybe longer. Several months. But I'd only found the grave last night, only heard the transmission starting at 9:47 p.m. Unless the grave had always been here for months, and my future self had only been able to transmit the warning during the storm, when atmospheric conditions allowed a signal to travel backward through time, from a future that happened but now wouldn't. I called it in at 1:19 a.m., reported the lightning strike, the fallen tree, the disturbed earth, said I'd found what looked like evidence of a burial and requested a forensic team. They arrived at dawn, 3 investigators and a cadaver dog. They excavated the site while I stood nearby, still holding the ID tag I'd found. 6 feet down, they found remains. Human, male, badly decomposed. Clothing suggested a ranger uniform. The investigators photographed everything, documented the scene, prepared to transport the remains for identification. One of them approached me. "Hayes, this is strange. The body's been here for a while, but the grave was recently disturbed, like someone dug it up and filled it back in. How long has the body been here?" Hard to say without proper analysis, but based on decomposition, I'd estimate several months at least, maybe longer. Several months. But I'd only found the grave last night, only heard the transmission starting at 9:47 p.m. Unless the grave had always been here for months, and my future self had only been able to transmit the warning during the storm, when atmospheric conditions allowed a signal to travel backward through time, from a future that happened but now wouldn't. I'd heard my own voice from a future that no longer existed, warning me, saving me, by broadcasting coordinates and warnings across time on a frequency that shouldn't have carried any signal at all. A new timeline had been created. But what happened to the future where I died? Did it cease to exist? Or does it still exist somewhere, parallel, with a version of me still lying in that grave? The forensic analysis took 3 weeks. DNA comparison, dental records, tissue samples. The results came back on December 9th. The remains were mine, Vincent Hayes, genetic match, perfect identity. The body in the grave was me from a timeline that had existed until I changed it by listening to my own warning. But that was impossible. I was alive, standing in the forensic lab, reading a report that said I was dead. Both statements were true simultaneously, which meant causality had broken down, which meant the universe was allowing contradictions to exist in superposition. The lead investigator, Dr. Patricia Ross, looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "This doesn't make sense. The body is definitely yours, but you're standing here, alive. The only explanation is identical twins, but your records show you're an only child. What about time of death?" That's the really strange part. Based on decomposition and insect activity, we estimate the death occurred approximately 4 months ago, late July or early August 2024. 4 months before November 18th, before the storm, before the transmission. I'd been dead since summer, but I'd lived through summer. I had memories, logs, evidence of my existence through August, September, October, November. 2 timelines, one where I died in July, one where I lived until November, and somehow the November timeline had sent information backward to the July timeline, preventing a death that would have happened in the future of a past that no longer existed. My head hurt trying to follow the logic. Time loops, causal paradoxes, bootstrap problems that philosophy professors wrote papers about, but no one ever actually experienced. Except I was experiencing it, living it, carrying a copy of my own ID tag from a grave containing my own remains from a timeline that had been overwritten. "What do we do with the remains?" Dr. Ross asked. "Bury them. They're me. They deserve that much." "But you're not dead." "I was, in another timeline. That version of me deserves a proper burial." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll arrange it." I buried myself on December 15th. Small ceremony. No one attended, except me and Dr. Ross. We laid the remains to rest in a cemetery outside Elkins, marked the grave with a simple stone that read Vincent Hayes, Ranger, remembered. Then I went back to work, resumed my night patrols, monitored the emergency frequencies, kept watch over the forest I'd sworn to protect. But every night, I tuned the old Regency scanner to 147.385 megahertz, the dead frequency, the one that carried my voice through time during the storm. And I listen. Most nights there's nothing, just static, empty carrier wave. The frequency stays dead, unused, silent. But sometimes, usually during storms, I hear something. Not whispers, not warnings, just echoes. Fragments of transmissions that seem to come from nowhere, voices that sound almost familiar, numbers that might be coordinates. I record everything, document it, map the locations when the numbers are clear enough. 3 times in the past month I've found graves, recent, disturbed earth, bodies that forensic analysis identifies as Park Service personnel from timelines that differ from ours by small details, different assignment histories, different death dates, different lives that ended and were somehow echoed backward through time to warn their living counterparts. We're not alone. I'm not the only one who received a warning. The frequency exists in multiple timelines simultaneously, creating a kind of temporal radio network where future selves can warn past selves about dangers that haven't happened yet, but have already killed them in parallel realities. I've started keeping a log. Transmissions received, coordinates investigated, graves found. Each one represents a timeline where someone died, but in our timeline still lives, having been warned by their own voice from a future that no longer exists. The universe is more fragile than we thought. Reality branches constantly, creating parallel timelines with every decision, every random event, every lightning strike that hits or misses. Most timelines are isolated, separate, distinct, but sometimes they touch, overlap, leak information through the gaps. And if you're listening on the right frequency at the right moment, you can hear yourself from a timeline where you made different choices or encountered different fate. I work night patrol differently now. I monitor the old frequencies more carefully, listen for whispers that might be warnings, follow coordinates that might lead to graves containing versions of myself or my colleagues from timelines where we weren't lucky enough to hear the warnings. 4 rangers in my sector have received transmissions since November. 4 different voices whispering coordinates on frequencies that should be dead. All of them their own voices from futures that were erased when they changed their fate, We formed a group, meet monthly to share experiences, compare logs, try to understand the mechanics of what we're experiencing, try to develop protocols for handling timeline echoes. We call ourselves the Frequency Watch, unofficial, unrecognized, existing outside normal organizational structures because what we do can't be explained in official reports. We save lives by listening to dead frequencies, by investigating graves that contain our own bodies from timelines that no longer exist, by taking warnings from our future selves seriously, even when they make no logical sense. My grave in the clearing is still there. The disturbed earth has settled, grass has grown over it. The site looks undisturbed now, like it's been empty for years instead of being excavated and refilled months ago. But I know what was there, what might still be there in timelines that diverged from ours at some earlier decision point, versions of me that didn't hear the warning, that got buried in that oak tree branch, that got buried in that clearing. I visit sometimes, stand at the spot where I should have died, look at the oak tree, now with a massive scar where the branch broke off. Think about the version of me that broadcast those coordinates with his dying breath, somehow managing to send a warning backward through the storm's electromagnetic chaos and reach a version of himself that could still escape. Did he know? In that final moment before the branch crushed him, did he understand that his death would create an echo, that his voice would travel backward through the storm's electromagnetic chaos and reach a version of himself that could still escape? Or was it automatic, some quantum mechanism where dying timelines naturally broadcast warnings to living ones trying to preserve consciousness across the multiverse? I don't know, may never know. The physics of timeline echoes isn't something anyone understands yet. But I know the frequency works, know that 147.385 MHz exists simultaneously in multiple timelines, creating a channel where information can leak between realities.
Every night, I sit at my console in the ranger station, monitoring the official frequencies and the unofficial ones. The dead bands, the decommissioned channels, the frequencies that shouldn't carry any signal but sometimes do. And I wait. Wait for my voice to come back, to whisper new coordinates, to warn me about a different danger in a different timeline, to tell me about another future where I die and need to send information backward to prevent it. Because the timeline where I died in July still happened, those 4 months existed, that version of me lived them, and then something changed. Some decision, some random event, some quantum fluctuation that caused reality to branch, creating a world where I lived to November and heard the warning. But in the original timeline, I never made it to November, never heard the transmission, never changed my fate. That version of me is still dead, still buried, still existing in a reality that runs parallel to this one, separated by decisions and dice rolls and chaos. And maybe, just maybe, he's still trying to warn me. Still broadcasting on 147.385 MHz, still whispering coordinates that might save me from dangers I haven't encountered yet in this timeline. I listen every night, scan the dead frequencies, record everything, document every whisper, every burst of static that might be a voice, every pattern that might be coordinates. The other rangers in the Frequency Watch do the same. We share data, cross-reference transmissions, build a map of timeline branches based on the graves we find and the warnings we receive. The multiverse is vast, infinite variations on every possible history. Most of them we'll never access, never experience, never know about. But sometimes, under the right conditions, we hear whispers from those other worlds, echoes of ourselves from timelines where we made different choices or encountered different luck. Versions of us that died and somehow managed to send warnings backward through the temporal noise. And if we listen carefully, if we take those warnings seriously, if we act on coordinates that lead to our own graves, we can change our fate. Overwrite the timelines where we die, create new branches where we survive. I am alive because I listened, because I heard my own voice whisper from a future that no longer exists, because I trusted that impossible voice and followed its warning. Now I wait for it to speak again, to tell me about the next danger, the next timeline where I don't survive, the next version of my death that needs to be prevented by a transmission across time. The frequency is quiet tonight, just static. Storm interference from a weather system moving through the region, normal atmospheric noise. But I'm listening, always listening, for the whisper in the headset that might be my own voice from tomorrow, trying desperately to save my today. Because the future is not fixed. Reality branches constantly, and sometimes, if you're listening on the right frequency, your future self can reach back and change the timeline before you die in it. The whisper might come tonight, might come tomorrow, might never come again. But I'll be here, monitoring the dead frequencies, waiting for my own voice to warn me about dangers I can still avoid. Because somewhere in the multiverse, a version of me is already dead, already buried, already whispering coordinates on 147.385 megahertz, trying to reach a version of himself that still has time to escape. And I owe it to him. To all the versions of me that died so I could live. To listen, to act, to change the timeline one warning at a time. The frequency crackles, static shifts. For just a moment I think I hear something, a voice, my voice, whispering. But then it's gone, just storm noise. Just my imagination wanting to hear a warning that isn't there yet. I adjust the scanner, check the recording equipment, make sure everything is working properly. And I wait for the next transmission, the next warning from my future self. Because he's out there, somewhere, somewhen, dying in a timeline I'll never experience, but trying to save me in the one I'm living. And the least I can do is listen. Friends, that was the story for today. I hope you enjoyed it and that it stayed with you in the best chilling way possible. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you. Your time and support truly mean more than you know. This channel is growing because of listeners like you. If you want more real and disturbing encounters like this, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel continue bringing these stories to life. And if this story gave you chills, let me know in the comments. I read them all, and your thoughts make this community stronger. Until next time, turn off the lights, double-check the room, and I'll see you in the next story.